All right. So I am not a carpenter. I hate carpentry. I've never been good at it. But it's one of those things that if you're going to do it, study up a little bit beforehand, take the time to do it right, and you can get some amazing results. This is a speaker box and shelf I'm planning for Roscoe. I'd seen something kind of similar that somebody else had in their truck, and it looked neat, but it was basically a plastic bin. The speaker was on this end, and there was plastic bins on this end. It looked really interesting, but I don't know where to find that, and I'm not sure that it was made for the GMT 400s. So I built this one. So I have this old Infinity subwoofer. I've had it forever and a day, and it can handle a decent amount of power. This is not going to be a competition stereo system. This is a stereo system for a usable truck, a daily street-driven kind of truck. So this needed the optimum cubic inches for this speaker is, or cubic feet is 1.25 cubic feet. And this center section is right about 1.25. If it's off of that, it's because of me not measuring right or me not accounting for the depth of the speaker. I don't know. So my original intent, I measured this in my son's truck, and it's got 6 inches of width at the top, 9 inches of width at the bottom, and it's 59 inches across, and that should fit behind the seats. And my intent was to mount the speaker inside the box, and that would take up some of my space, but that would give me a little more clearance here. As it turns out, that angle there, the speaker would stick through the back wall, so I had to stick it on the front side, and that's going to take up some of my space, so I may not be able to put a full bench seat in front of this. I may have to do bucket seats and just have that exposed. So when it comes to woodworking, I sketched this up in Tinkercad first, and with millimeters for measurements instead of inches because Tinkercad's limited like that. But I played with it, got it sorted out, and figured out what how it was going to look and if the measurements were going to work right. Then when I went to build it, I screwed up several times in building it, but got it done. One thing I will say is when you're putting screws through plywood, every time I laid this wood together to screw it together or whatever, you can see some of the lines here. I drew lines. I have a chalk string. I laid a chalk string down to set up lines, and I measured to make sure that all these screws were going to go right in the middle of the underlying piece of plywood. I did not eyeball any of these screws. They were all measured and set where they needed to be to begin with. And then when I put the screws in, I pre-drilled the holes with I think it was about an 1/8 inch drill bit. That way you're not splitting the wood apart. And then I soaped the screws before I set them in. So little details like that when you're building something like this make a difference. Again, I'm not a carpenter. I suck at carpentry, but I made sure and took those steps because I know how bad my carpentry is. The chalk line worked great for laying everything out. My measurements are just, I was so close on so much of this. If you don't know much about carpentry, there's a lot of cheats that carpenters use to make things work. And if you're building a cabinet like this, there's less of those cheats you can use. So when it came to mounting the speaker, I kind of screwed up because my plans ended up different. But also this front panel is not removable. If I ever have to change the speaker out, I bolted these on. There's nuts on the backside and they're lock nuts, so I'm not going to be able to get this off. I'll have to drill the heads of the bolts off in order to get that apart if I ever need to. Alternatively, I could unscrew everything and knock it apart, but when you're making speaker boxes, you want to put wood glue between all the seams. So this center box here is completely wood glued to make it airtight. So it's wood glued, it's screwed, and then I varnished over everything when I was done. So this center section is not coming out. This speaker is pretty much permanent. The only way I'll be able to get it out is if I drill out the heads of the bolts. And the same for the wiring connections here. These are bolted on. They have nuts on the backside. So I was trying to make it, a little more serviceable because, screws, you put them in, you pull them out, the wood's a little torn up and it gets looser the more you do that. I tried to make it serviceable and I made it unserviceable. So, best laid plans of mice and men, but thinking about the details ahead of time, drilling these holes, using a chalk line to lay them out matters. So hopefully I get this in pretty soon. I still got to make the shelves for here. I got to get some thinner plywood. I know I've got some around somewhere, but I can't find it. And those are not going to be stained and varnished like the rest of it. I'm just going to make black shelves for these. So, and as far as the staining and varnishing process, I just got some cheap brushes. I got some cheap stain. I got some polyurethane varnish. And I did, when you go to varnish it, lay your varnish on good and thick, and then come back a day later and re-varnish it, because your wood will soak up a lot of that varnish and you won't see it until a day later. So, and I can see I just re-varnished some of this just a few minutes ago, and I've got some runs in it, but it's not that visible unless you get it in just the right light. So I'm going to leave that be. Anyways, there you go. That's pretty much what you need to know. Plan ahead, draw it out, draw the thickness of include the thickness of your wood in your calculations so that you don't end up with joints that don't work. This was a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and that's the plywood I have left over from it. So hopefully I can get this start putting the interior of the Roscoe back together and get this in and see how it fits. I do have to worry about the seats I'm going to put in Roscoe. The seats in Way Cool Jr. are thick. There are some Cadillac leather seats that are really nice, but they take up too much cab space. I'm going to need some thin seats to go in front of this, but I need thin, comfortable seats because I'm building that truck to haul long distances. So we'll see.